A naked human being was never supposed to survive a real winter. We don't have fur. We don't have a blubber layer like a seal. We don't hibernate like a bear. Biologically, we're a tropical animal built for the African savanna, not for -40 in Siberia. And yet our ancestors didn't just survive an ice age. They walked straight into one, on foot, voluntarily, without a single synthetic thread on their bodies. And what they figured out along the way is still used today by polar expeditions, emergency response teams, and trauma medicine. Stick around till the end. There's a trick coming that modern science only recently started to explain. Here's the brutal math. A naked person in freezing temperatures can slip into hypothermia in under 3 hours. Fingers stop working. The brain slows down. The heart starts skipping beats. Death by cold isn't sudden. It's a slow shutdown, system by system. And this badly equipped species still reached the Arctic Circle before it even invented writing. The secret wasn't hiding from winter. The secret was cheating physics. Here's the first mind bender. To stay warm, you had to bury yourself in the exact thing that looks like it should kill you, snow. Snow is a terrible heat conductor. Inside a properly built snow shelter, with nothing but one fat-burning lamp, the temperature can run 30 to 40 degrees Celsius warmer than outside. That's the difference between -50 and -10. The Inuit cut snow blocks at just the right angle, so the dome held itself up with 0 support beams. The entrance tunnel was built lower than the sleeping platform, because cold air is heavier and sinks, just like water. Warm air stayed trapped up top, right where people slept. 2 experienced people could build the whole structure in under 2 hours. Modern engineers, studying this design for emergency shelters, still haven't meaningfully improved on it. But a shelter only solves half the problem. What do you do about a body that's bleeding heat from the inside no matter what? This next one sounds disgusting until you understand why they did it. People across the Arctic and Siberia rubbed rendered animal fat, seal, bear, caribou, straight onto exposed skin, the face, the hands, anywhere uncovered. Fat repels water, and moisture on skin in the wind is actually a bigger killer than dry cold air on its own. Channel swimmers still coat themselves in grease before getting in the water for the exact same reason. But that fat wasn't just a windbreak. It carried fat-soluble vitamin D, the vitamin you're desperately short on when the sun barely shows up for months. The skin absorbed some of it right through the layer of grease. One move protected you from the wind and treated a deficiency you didn't even know you had. And it's still not the smartest thing they came up with. Here's a fact that'll change how you think about the people who came before us. Without one small tool, humans probably never settled the northern hemisphere. A hide thrown over your shoulders isn't clothing. It's a leaky bucket. Wind rips in at the sides, your arms are exposed, and it slides off the second you move. The breakthrough came when someone took a sliver of bone, ground it down to almost nothing, and drilled a hole through it thinner than a strand of hair, the eye of a needle. Archaeologists have found needles like this dating back more than 40,000 years, some considerably older. The thread came from sinew, the tough connective tissue that links muscle to bone. With that needle, clothing stopped being a cape and became a suit. Fitted sleeves, closed seams, a pocket of warm air sealed right against the skin. But the smartest part of that clothing wasn't how well it kept heat in. It's how well it knew when not to. Here's a detail that most people living with central heating have completely forgotten. In the Arctic, sweat can kill faster than cold. Inuit clothing could be loosened at the collar and cuffs during hard exertion, running, hauling, to vent body heat, then sealed back up the moment activity stopped. The goal wasn't to stay as warm as possible. It was to avoid sweating. Wet fur loses most of its insulating value. And when you stop moving after a hunt, soaked, at -40, that can be fatal within half an hour. The system used 2 layers, fur facing in against the skin, fur facing out against the wind, with the air gap between them adjusted by how tightly the outer layer was worn. It was a fully adjustable climate control system made of hide, thousands of years before the word thermostat existed. Bodies warm, clothes are sorted, but the sun is going down, and now there's a question that could decide whether the whole group makes it through the night. Where do you actually sleep? Caves are the myth that shelter is always sitting there waiting for you. In reality, a good, dry, defensible cave was rare, and if you found one, chances are someone else wanted it too. So people built their own. At a site called Mezirik, in what's now Ukraine, archaeologists found homes built roughly 15,000 years ago, in a place with almost no wood and almost no stone. So they built with the one raw material available in massive supply, mammoth bones. Dozens of skeletons, hundreds of bones per structure. Jawbones stacked like roof shingles. Massive tusks arched over the doorways. This wasn't a one-night shack. It was a serious engineered structure, built to hold through an entire winter. But bones don't fit together perfectly. Every joint is a gap, and every gap is an open door for the wind. They sealed those gaps in layers, like a system, not patch by patch. Hides were stretched across the inside walls. Blocks of sod were stacked against the outside. And where possible, people packed snow on top of that, because a thick layer of snow insulates almost as well as a blanket, since it traps air inside it. At a site in South Africa, researchers found bedding made of carefully layered grass and leaves dating back roughly 77,000 years. People were making their shelters comfortable before our species had even left Africa. But a warm shelter creates a brand new problem almost nobody thinks about. Most people today assume a fire belongs dead center, heating everything equally. The archaeology suggests otherwise. A fire built against the back wall, with a reflector behind it, stone or packed earth, throws radiant heat forward, straight at the sleeping area, far more efficiently than a central fire that loses half its heat to an empty wall. Then there were heated stones, warmed in the fire, then brought inside, where an open flame would be dangerous. They hold heat for hours. You could move them into bedding, drop them in water to boil it without a fire, or press them against a frostbitten limb. Not every rock worked, though. Some, with moisture trapped inside, would explode when heated, so knowing which stones were safe was passed down like a safety manual. Staying warm was only half the battle. The other half started long before the first snowfall. That craving for rich, fatty food in autumn isn't just a seasonal mood swing. It's an ancient biological program built to pack on fat before the hungry season hits. Autumn feasts across northern cultures weren't just celebrations. They were coordinated calorie-loading events. Fat, bone marrow, organ meat, nuts, the most calorie-dense food available, distributed through the group right when the body is best at converting it into fat reserves. This wasn't only about individual survival, either. A group where everyone went into winter with decent fat reserves lost fewer people to cold and starvation than a group where reserves were unevenly split. Generosity at the feast wasn't just kindness. It was a survival strategy for the whole group. Now here's a fact that flips everything you'd assume about frozen meat. Arctic peoples fermented walrus, fish heads, and seal flipper, foods mostly famous today for their overwhelming smell. But fermenting without heat preserved food in places where there wasn't enough fuel to cook everything all season. It broke down harmful compounds in raw meat, and in some cases, the fermentation process itself produced vitamin C, the only source of it in a diet with almost no plants. Ancient Arctic peoples were preventing scurvy through fermentation centuries before the British Royal Navy, with all its resources and scientific knowledge, was still losing sailors to it. But the most underrated survival skill of all wasn't food and wasn't clothing. It was reading animals like a manual. Animals had been adapting to winter for millions of years longer than humans had, so ancient people watched them as a field guide written in real time. Where an animal chose to den for the winter was, by itself, a finished analysis. Wind protection, thermal mass from the surrounding earth, no risk of standing meltwater. People who camped in the same spots animals picked for denning were effectively borrowing millions of years of instinct they hadn't had to earn themselves. Migration patterns told them when food would disappear, letting them plan stores well in advance. And when animals moved in ways that made no obvious sense, that unusual behavior often served as an early warning of a storm no human sense could detect yet. And the last trick is the strangest one of all. It's not about the body or the food. It's about tracking time without a single clock. Stonehenge, Newgrange in Ireland. The medicine wheels on the North American plains. These are usually discussed in mystical terms, but on a very practical level, they were survival instruments. A structure that marks the exact day of the winter solstice told people they'd made it past the turning point and could start easing up on rationing. And the deadliest stretch of winter often comes after the solstice, right when stores are already running low. Knowing exactly where you stood in that timeline was information that could decide whether you saw spring. The people who held this knowledge tracked more than the sun. They watched the behavior of plants, the texture of frost, how animals responded to lengthening days before any human could consciously notice the difference. Someone who could stand outside in the dead of winter and say, with real confidence, "The worst is behind us, the animals already feel it," was holding information the entire group depended on. So here's what to take away from all of this. None of it was luck. Snow used as insulation, grease used as armor and a vitamin supplement, a needle that became the ticket north, a suit with a built-in climate control system, a house built out of a dead mammoth, fire placed against a wall instead of the middle of the room, a feast calculated down to the calorie, fermented food that prevented a disease nobody had even named yet, animals used as a weather report, stones used as a calendar for the end of winter. Every one of these solutions came from people forced to notice absolutely everything, because noticing everything was the only thing standing between them and spring. Winter has killed more people than every war in history combined, but the ones it didn't kill left us the instructions.